stop, and I have some time for questions.
Yeah, we want to respect your time. I promised you we'd get you out on time, but you're using the language of liberal arts.
Yes.
And that maybe is understood differently now than it has been historically, but by liberal arts, that's really what people would call a classical education, to use the more recent kind of terminology, correct?
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, the word liberal arts has been hijacked by, my son is an Aggie. For those of you that know anything about Texas A&M, he graduated from Texas A&M Mathematics. He's an actuary today. If you go to the liberal arts college or the liberal arts section at Texas A&M, it's where all the feminine studies, gender studies, you feel icky after you've visited the liberal arts section. So I'm talking about the historical understanding of liberal arts. My interest, of course, is not only so they're broken into two basic categories. You have the language arts, and you have the math, music, science arts. And so you have this curriculum, really. And a lot of us talk about the liberal arts generically, but I think it's not simply the curriculum, but they're arts. So they have to be exercised or practiced upon something. Not too many people say, for instance, well, I have a job at hammering. You're a construction worker, right? You use a hammer. So you have these arts, and these were the arts, the tools, you might call them, that were utilized historically, were given among us, and there's a whole history to that. I was hoping somebody else might talk about that. Read a good book. But I'm using it in the historic sense of the liberal arts. It most certainly includes mathematics, science. My love, I'm more of a math and science guy than I am anywhere near a Latinist. So that's what I'm referring to. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 16th century mindset of Melanchthon and Luther. Were it not for Melanchthon's education and training in classics, Luther would have had a lot harder time doing the work that he did, and really laid the groundwork for people thinking and applying their theology. And so...
Yes, I would agree with that. I think Bugenhagen's contribution, to go back to him, was his theological contribution. So Melanchthon certainly brought the liberal arts to the table, but Bugenhagen, as a pastor, thought about things theologically. And he's the one that really, I think, most clearly in my mind, I'm sure there's other writings, but he's certainly the one who has imprinted upon Lutheran schools today this link to baptism. Now, I understand at Our Savior Lutheran, I would almost bet that you don't have 100% Missouri Synod Lutherans or people who want to all have their children baptized, right? So my thought is this, that we teach to baptize and we teach the baptized. Does that make sense? We teach to baptize, and we in order that they might be baptized. So often we'll talk about those who are baptized or those who will be baptized, because to be a Christian, every Christian denomination that is Trinitarian, any Trinitarian, and that goes hand in hand, right? Trinitarian Christian baptizes. It's just when they baptize, right? So I try to point out this commonality among Christians, and that these will be baptized. You will be baptized, and when we do that, we end up with a lot of baptisms in our congregations, and people joining the church. Actually, when you're deliberate about teaching that, entire families actually. So we just, as Lutherans, we just need to confess and do what we believe. We need to live in it. Sir.
Then ask more about practice. But you had mentioned that the majority of your students, as well as your faculty, that come from sort of non-Lutheran backgrounds.
Yes.
What sort of practical challenges does that present?
All kinds.
How do you, and then how do you manage that? Like, how do you handle that with families, and of course, with the faculty themselves?
Yes, I know this is being recorded, and that's fine with me. I've been very vocal about this in our parish. We need to invest in Lutheran educators. Pure and simple, period, really. But more about that.
Good.
We as a church, I think, would do well, and it's my opinion that actually we need to put Lutherans first in our hiring period on that. And I mean, what often happens is schools will have policies that say that, we'll hire Lutherans first, and then we'll hire, if we can't find a Lutheran, we'll hire a Christian that is in a close alignment, but they've got to agree, they've got to sign a piece of paper that say, to me, that is very difficult. You would never catch me signing a paper like that, and I wouldn't ask someone to sign a paper like that, because you're asking them to go against their conscience, in my opinion, to sign a paper that says that they will do nothing, teach nothing, contrary. First of all, they don't even know all the things that belong to Lutheranism, so they don't even know if they accidentally do that. So I personally have sort of an issue with that. At the same time as I would say that knowingly, this is a Lutheran school, we're going to teach Lutheran doctrine. But ultimately, we need to hire Lutherans first. And what I would do with that hiring practice is, we are in a position today, friends, whether you are a classical Lutheran school, and you pick your flavor of Lutheran education. There is a shortage of Lutheran educators today. There is a shortage of Lutheran administrators today. There is a shortage of Lutheran pastors today. We are short. I think one of the reasons we're short is because we've forgotten that we are preservers of the church. It's not only that, it's more complicated than that. I understand there's population issues and things like that. But the church, this is not the first time the LCMS has dealt with a shortage of Lutheran pastors and teachers. My great aunt Elvira Preuss, God rest her soul, she died just this past January, short of her 102nd birthday. For CUC grad, she was featured this past summer in the Forester. And her story is a beautiful story. But my great aunt Elvira Preuss, when she was sent out to teach, her first place that she was sent to teach was Tyler, Texas, right out of CUC. She grew up in Seymour, Indiana. Right? She goes down to Tyler, Texas. Because there was a shortage of teachers in the LCMS, she went out after about 2 years at Concordia River Forest. Only about 2 years. And I believe it's in the article, if you read the article in the Forester. What did they want to make sure she knew in her day before they sent her out? Did she need to understand who Piaget was? Did she need to understand Bloom's taxonomy? Did she need to understand all? No. She had a Bible history test that she had to pass. She had to have the catechism memorized.
Yeah.
And she had to know how to play the piano, but she knew how to play the organ. Because that used to be what was required of a Lutheran teacher. Those three cardinal things. Bible history, memorize the catechism, that is, know about it, or write an essay about what you think the catechism says, to memorize the catechism, and how to play the piano. With those things available to her, she went and taught. She didn't have a bachelor's degree. She didn't have a teaching degree. The state's teacher certification came about at CUC, I think it was in the 50s. It's in the book at CUC. What I would call the plague of state teacher certification is new to the LCMS. if you read the history of state teacher certification in the LCMS, actually, for a long time, you can read Synodical Convention, overtures, and so forth and so on. They pushed back against state teacher certification because the church asked, what does the state know about baptizing, about catechizing, about the formation of of children? They don't. It's not their job to understand that. Walther even said, it's in my paper notes here, which I forgot to say, that in America, actually, the congregation must become the government. That was Walther. You can agree or disagree with Walther, but the congregation must take over these things. That really switched as state teacher certification and so forth. I grew up I've had teaching certificates either earned or worked toward in at least 3 different states, so I understand the process. And I'm a Harry K. Wonger. Anybody else had Harry K. Wong? 2 Wongs make a Y? What are you supposed to do if you're a Harry K. Wong teacher? You take your teaching certificate and you blow it up and you put it over your desk because therein you are a professional. I would argue that that's not necessarily true. It just means that you have a certificate. That's what it means. It does not necessarily mean that you are a professional. And I say that as one who has worked hard to get those certificates. And I've worked hard to get certificates in administration. But I think that time has proven out that those in and of themselves do not guarantee the things that they are supposed to guarantee. And the Lutherans have understood that it's in our history. Actually, you can read all about it and why the Lutherans were very much opposed. And finally, they gave in. I think one of the first was Concordia, Nebraska in the 20s. But teacher certification has changed a lot since 1920. So I wouldn't be too severe with Concordia, Nebraska. I sent 2 of my children to Concordia, Nebraska. But nonetheless, to me, it's sort of like the frog in cold water that got warmer and then started boiling, and before you know it, we'd sort of already swallowed a hook, line, and sinker. Anybody else? These are very candid opinions. I'm glad to share them. And I've got another 10 minutes to do so. Yes, ma'am.
So in what ways do you think that state certification has taken us away from a liberal arts historically understood?
Yeah, my probably even a greater concern than the liberal arts. Okay, so in Seymour, Indiana, I did not have the stricter liberal arts education that I'm talking about. Even though in 6th grade, Mrs. Reinhardt taught it, we read Shakespeare. We read great poetry, okay? We had to memorize the catechism. We prayed matins at least once a week. And that's another thing. I think that we have abandoned our historic forms of worship within the school day, which would have been unheard of just probably a handful of years ago. But I think what's happened, my concern is, and somebody was telling me, maybe it was you, that was telling me about Illinois' understanding of who does the child belong to? It belongs to the state. My bigger concern, rather than the liberal arts, if you heard my sermon last night, we cannot put our trust in the liberal arts. We put our trust in the Lord. That's always first. I do not think that the state understands who the Lord is, nor how children relate to the Lord and what it means to. Their foundation for education is not the same as ours. We start from baptism. We understand the nature of a child much differently from that of the state. This was actually the case. I used to be, when I was in the Texas district, I served as the NLSA LSAC chairperson for the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So in that capacity, in around 2000, I was working, and several of my teachers and I were working on Texas State teacher certification. And I was really pushing this with faculty because it was going to be a life certification. Those of you that have had certificates know how valuable that is. You get your life certification. You never have to take another class. As I was looking into that and preparing for that exam, I realized that the state assumed a natural goodness in a child. And I started wrinkling my head. Well, as a Lutheran, don't we believe that I am by nature, I've inherited from Adam and Eve through my parents a sinful nature? There's nothing naturally good in me. I don't have good inclinations. I sin in thought, word, and deed. But as the member of the church, I've been called out of that. It's a passive thing. God has done this for me. It's much different understanding of even what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a child? On that very simple question, fundamental question, the state disagrees with the church. And on that reason alone, I would say that I find, excuse me, the state's outlook and the things that have descended from that very thinking is problematic. Now we don't understand the nature of a human being because human beings get to decide who they are. Am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I a dog? Am I a cat? And I know some of these things sound crazy. I don't know if they go on here in Louisville, but hey, in my world down in Dallas-Fort Worth, we saw it. We saw that happening for real. I haven't seen it in Wyoming, but I certainly saw it. So, well, why are those things happening? Because they have a wrong-headed understanding of what it means to be a human being, that God has designed us to be who we are. That you're either a double X or an XY, and you're a human, and that is substantively who you are. It's your substance. So this goes against the foundations of the state. It would be my argument. So without even getting into the whole liberal arts and this kind of thing, that's where I would start. Are there any other questions?
I was going to ask one, but I think out of respect for your time.
Well, I have 5 minutes.
Well, so as I've been talking throughout our district about classical education, I've frequently been asked to give essentially the elevator speech. What is classical education? How do you put it in a nutshell? So whether you call it classical education, CCLE, or liberal arts, a classical liberal arts, in 2 minutes, the elevator speech, I mean, what would you summarize as kind of the highlights and hallmarks of that classical liberal arts education?
Yeah, I think one way of saying it is the best of historic Lutheran education today. Because, and I say it that way, even to get away from liberal arts and those kinds of discussion, Lutheran education by definition, and from the 16th century, most certainly included the liberal arts. So that is, if you want to get away from no one understands liberal arts or classical, and classical and liberal arts have become fad terms today. Fad, F-A-D. I'm not into those fads. Okay, I'm not into those fads. There's a lot of curriculum. You can spend lots of money. You can spend a lot of money to go to conferences and listen to bigwigs give all kinds of speeches. You can spend a lot of money. It's become to me, that's a fad. But what I'm interested in is how have Lutherans understood education? Why did they embrace in their day what was called a liberal arts education? And what they embraced was really something that was passed down to them. Lutherans aren't the creators of liberal arts. They existed prior to Lutheranism. The Lutherans took a liberal arts education and they inoculated it with the evangelical faith. And they found that the liberal arts, along with the catechism, as Luther would say, would preserve the church for pastors and teachers, but also for statesmen. It's interesting to me that someone questioned Luther, and I had this question when I was on a school Genesis project, why do farmers need to know Latin? Or why do farmers need to read Plato? Or why do farmers need to, this kind of question? Well, Luther's answer, in part, would include, well, if pastors or teachers are ever needed, you stand ready to serve. You stand ready to serve. Now, I know there's more answer than that. But that would kind of be my elevator speech, that it is the best of historic Lutheran education in a contemporary setting. So we're not taking the liberal arts and cutting and pasting that today. If that were true, then you would have to teach physics in Latin. Okay, we don't do that. So in many ways, I think that there has been a putting together of the best, because we teach the subjects in English, and we teach mathematics in English. In Luther's day, the liberal arts would have been taught in Latin, right? All of them, music, so forth. But for us, we use English to do that, as well as embrace the best of the liberal arts. I also would challenge us with this as sort of a concluding thought. We have not arrived. If you look at the school that I'm serving, and I'm sure that Mr. Pullman would acknowledge this, we are in the pursuit of a classical Lutheran education. Because I found this early in my own thinking. Like, well, all classical schools use Saxon mathematics. You're like, well, so do the public schools, guy. You're like, okay, it's true. Let me rethink that statement, you know. So it isn't as if we just implement this, or, you know, what's the other way we tend to do it? Buy curriculum from a classical publisher. Well, I don't know. I think the answer is, you teachers embrace the best of the past. Be encouraged in the history of where you have come from. Understand it. Embrace the best. We like the term best practice, don't we? Embrace the best practices of your Lutheran forefathers and live in those today. Embracing the best practices of your forefathers and living in those today will necessarily include a classical or liberal arts education, but it will be an education for today, not a repristination or a cut and paste of yesterday into today. It will be today's challenges, today's church, the things that the church faces today that Luther, Bugenhagen, Melanchthon would have never thought of. So it can't be that. It can't be that. In that sense, it's actually progressive. I know that's going to bother some people, because the difference is a progressive education kind of just looks back to where they came from immediately. But in this sense, I think Lutherans need to look back to her rich history and see where we have failed and where the Lord has granted us success. And then see that in light of today. I think doing that will be the pursuit of things that are biblically beautiful, true, and good for us. And to regain a very biblical and Lutheran confessional understanding of our schools as foundational to our schools, rather than state goals and state objectives for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.